She pushed the door open just a crack, and that's when she heard it. A man's voice, thick with a foreign accent, chuckling as he raised his glass. "You're lucky your wife understands your priorities, Ryan." Zoe froze, her fingers still resting on the door. Ryan laughed. Actually laughed. The kind of easy, practiced laugh he gave at board meetings when he wanted a room to feel comfortable. "My marriage," he said, "was the safest business decision I ever made." The room erupted into laughter around him. Zoe's stomach dropped. "Love never built billion-dollar companies," Ryan continued, swirling his drink, completely unaware that 6 feet away, behind a half-open door, his pregnant wife was standing frozen, a baby rattle slipping from fingers that had gone numb. It hit the carpet without a sound. She didn't wait to hear anything else. She turned, walked out through the crowd with a smile plastered onto her face so no one would ask questions, and didn't stop moving until she was outside in the cold night air, gasping like she'd been underwater. 8 weeks pregnant, and she had just learned she was never meant to be his wife. She was a transaction, a line item, a safest business decision. If this story is already gripping you, smash that like button right now. It helps more people find this video, and trust me, you have not seen the twist that's coming. Zoe didn't cry on the drive home. She didn't cry when she unlocked the penthouse door, either, or when she walked past the travel brochure she'd spent weeks collecting, or when she saw the little corner of the living room she'd decorated just for tonight's reveal. She simply stood there for a long, long moment, absorbing the silence of a home she'd built with a man who apparently saw her as a strategic asset. Then she moved. She packed only what she needed. Her passport, a change of clothes, the pregnancy test wrapped carefully in a scarf like something precious because despite everything, it still was. She left her wedding ring on the dining table, catching the light one last time as she set it down. Beside it, she placed the 2 train tickets to Kyoto, the anniversary surprise that would never happen now. And finally a note, written in her neat, careful handwriting, the kind she used when she wanted every word to matter. "I wanted our anniversary to become the happiest day of your life. Instead, I learned I was only part of your business plan." She read it twice, set down the pen, and walked out before the sun rose. By the time Ryan came home that night, late, exhausted, already rehearsing an apology for missing her at the gala, the apartment was spotless. Too spotless. He noticed the silence first, the way a house feels different when someone has truly left it. Then he saw the table, the ring, the tickets, the note. He read it once, twice, 3 times, his hands shaking harder with each pass, until the paper crumpled in his fist and he was calling her name into an apartment that would never answer him again. Her phone was disconnected by morning. Her design firm confirmed she had resigned, effective immediately, no forwarding information given. Ryan hired investigators. He called every airline, every hotel, every contact she'd ever mentioned. Zoe Richardson had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed at all, except for the ring sitting untouched on his dining table, and the 2 Kyoto tickets he could never bring himself to throw away. If you think this is heartbreaking, wait until you see what happened 6 years later. But first, drop a comment below telling me where you think Zoe went, because I want to know if you can guess what's coming. 6 years passed. In Vancouver, a woman named Zoe Richardson had built something extraordinary out of the wreckage of that one night. Her sustainable interior design firm had just won its 3rd industry award. Her client list stretched across the country, and every evening she came home to the one thing that mattered more than any of it. Her son Kai, 6 years old, endlessly curious, endlessly gentle, currently obsessed with building tiny Japanese gardens out of moss and stone on their kitchen windowsill. "Mommy, look," Kai said one evening, carefully placing a miniature wooden bridge over a river made of blue glass beads. "This one's for you." Zoe knelt beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. He had Ryan's eyes. She saw it every single day and had long since stopped letting it hurt. "It's beautiful, baby," she said. "Where did you learn to make these?" Kai shrugged, focused on his tiny bridge. "I just know how. It feels like I've done it before. Zoe's chest tightened, but she smiled anyway. When people asked about his father, teachers, neighbors, the occasional overly curious parent at school pickup, she always gave the same gentle, unshaken answer. He lives very far away. She never once said a cruel word about Ryan. Not because she'd forgiven the moment she overheard in that lounge, but because she refused to let bitterness become the inheritance she passed down to her son. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Ryan Nakamura had become one of the most successful men in Japan, and one of the emptiest. Nakamura Robotics had expanded into 3 new countries. Magazines called him a visionary. Investors fought for meetings with him. And every single night, he came home to a penthouse that still had an anniversary gift sitting on the shelf, wrapped, untouched, exactly where Zoe had left it 6 years earlier. He never remarried. He never even dated. Once a year on their anniversary, he flew to Kyoto alone and stood at the train station, staring at the platform where the sightseeing train departed, the one they were supposed to ride together, and never once got on it. It felt like a betrayal of a promise he could no longer keep. His sister Aiko worried about him constantly, in her own particular way. "You need to move forward, Ryan," she told him more than once, arranging papers on his desk with brisk efficiency. "The company needs a stable image. A single, aging CEO with no family isn't the story we want investors to see." Ryan barely looked up. "I had a family, Aiko." "You had a distraction," she said quietly, and something in her tone lingered a beat too long, though Ryan, lost in his own grief, never noticed it. This part of the story gets even more emotional, so if you're not subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. You don't want to miss the moment fate finally brings them back together. That reunion came without warning, the way fate often does. Tokyo was hosting the International Sustainable Design Expo, the largest of its kind, and Zoe's firm had been nominated for the highest honor in the industry. She almost declined the invitation. Almost. But her business partner insisted it was too important to skip, and some quiet, aching part of her, the part that still remembered a wooden rattle slipping from her fingers, wanted to see the city one more time. She brought Kai with her because she never left him behind for long, and because some instinct she couldn't name told her he needed to come. The expo hall buzzed with cameras and press on the night of the award ceremony. Zoe accepted her trophy with grace, gave a short and gracious speech about sustainable design being an act of love for future generations, and stepped down from the stage to thunderous applause. Unaware that 2 exhibition halls away, Ryan Nakamura was unveiling his company's latest breakthrough to a wall of flashing cameras. Kai, however, had wandered. Bored during a live interview segment, the 6-year-old slipped away from his mother's assistant and drifted toward the glowing robotics exhibit down the hall, drawn by the small mechanical garden display Ryan's team had built. Moving koi fish, a tiny fountain, delicate metal cherry blossoms that opened and closed with the light. "That's really cool," Kai said, standing beside a tall man in a dark suit who was crouched down adjusting one of the panels. Ryan glanced over, smiling the practice smile he gave to every child who wandered near his booth. "Thank you. Are you here with your parents?" "My mom," Kai said. "I lost her. Do you know where my mom is?" Ryan knelt down to the boy's eye level, ready to call security, ready to help. And that's when he saw it. The bracelet on the child's wrist. Small, wooden, hand-carved, a pattern of interlocking waves he would recognize anywhere in the world because his own 2 hands had carved it 6 years earlier as an anniversary gift for the only woman he had ever loved. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. "Where did you get that bracelet?" Kai looked down at his wrist, unbothered. "My mom gave it to me. She said my dad made it." The room seemed to tilt beneath Ryan's feet. "What's your mom's name?" he asked, voice barely holding steady. "Zoe," the boy said simply. "Zoe Richardson." Ryan looked up and across the crowded exhibition hall, through 100 strangers and flashing cameras. He saw her. Older, more radiant than he remembered, if that was even possible. Walking quickly toward her son with panic in her eyes. Panic that turned to something else entirely the moment she saw who was kneeling beside him. Their eyes met. 6 years of silence collapsed into a single, unbearable second. I promise you, the next part is even more devastating. So before we continue, comment one word that describes how you'd feel in Zoe's shoes right now, because I want to read every single one of them. Zoe reached them in seconds, pulling Kai gently against her side, her whole body trembling. Kai, baby, you can't just wander off like that. Zoe, Ryan said, and just the sound of her name in his mouth after 6 years of silence nearly broke him where he stood. She looked at him properly for the first time. Older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, and still, despite everything, achingly familiar. You look well, she said, because she didn't know what else to say. Is he? Ryan's eyes flicked to Kai, to the bracelet, to the eyes that mirrored his own. Zoe, is he mine? Her jaw tightened. You don't get to ask me that here. Not like this. Please, Ryan said, and his voice cracked in a way she had genuinely never heard before. I've spent 6 years not knowing if you were alive. Please. Zoe held Kai a little tighter, looked at the crowd beginning to notice them, and finally said, quiet and controlled, his name is Kai. He's 6. Do the math yourself, Ryan. She walked away before he could say another word, Kai glancing back over his shoulder at the tall stranger with the sad eyes and the wooden garden, wondering why his mother's hands were shaking. Ryan didn't chase her. He simply stood there among his glowing mechanical cherry blossoms, feeling every single accomplishment of the last 6 years turn to ash in his mouth. He had built an empire, and in the one hallway that actually mattered, he had just lost everything all over again. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at his desk and began to write. Not apologies, because he knew apologies meant nothing to a woman who had heard him call their marriage a safest business decision, but memories. Their first ramen date, when she'd laughed so hard broth nearly came out of her nose, and he'd fallen for her right there on a plastic stool in a tiny shop in Shibuya. Their honeymoon in Okinawa, the week they got sunburned trying to learn surf. Their first apartment, so small they had to eat dinner sitting on the floor, and how she'd said she'd never been happier in her life. He sent the letters one by one, through her firm's public office address, never expecting a reply, never demanding one. Zoe read every single one. She never wrote back, but she didn't throw them away either. And some nights, long after Kai had fallen asleep with his tiny gardens scattered across his windowsill, she sat at her kitchen table rereading them with tears she refused to let herself examine too closely. If you've ever had to decide whether to let someone back into your life after they broke your heart, you understand exactly what Zoe is going through right now. And if this story has you feeling something, don't scroll past without hitting that like button, because it truly helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. It was during this fragile, uncertain silence that Ryan finally uncovered the truth he never expected. Digging through his company's old event archives for an unrelated legal matter, he stumbled across the original, unedited recording from that gala 6 years earlier. His own voice, younger, tired, but unmistakably sincere, continued on after the line that had shattered his marriage. That's why I married Zoe first. Love made everything else worth fighting for. Ryan stared at the screen, his blood running cold. That sentence had never reached Zoe. Someone had cut it. Someone had taken the recording, sliced away the truth, and left only the cruelty behind. It didn't take him long to trace the edit back to a single company laptop. His sister's. He confronted Aiko in her office that same night, the recording playing on a laptop between them like an accusation neither of them could look away from. You did this, he said, his voice low and shaking with a fury he had never once directed at his own sister. You edited it. You let her believe. I did it for the company, Aiko said, not even bothering to deny it, her composure finally cracking after 6 years of silence. She distracted you, Ryan. Every decision you made, you ran it through her first. I watched you become soft. I watched investors start to whisper. I thought, her voice broke just slightly. I thought if she left on her own, it would be cleaner. less painful for everyone. I never imagined she was pregnant. I never imagined she would simply disappear. Ryan sat down heavily, the fight draining out of him, replaced by something far heavier, the full, crushing weight of understanding exactly what his family had cost him. No edit could have hurt her, he finally said, staring at his own hands, if I hadn't chosen those words in the first place. You gave her a reason to doubt me, but I'm the one who gave you the words to cut. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He simply stood, walked out of her office, and never let her near a single family decision again. We're getting close to the ending now, and it is worth every second. So if this story has kept you hooked this long, subscribe now, so you don't miss what this channel brings you next. Ryan didn't tell Zoe about the recording right away. He knew, deep down, that the truth of one manipulated sentence didn't erase 6 years of a father who was never there. So instead, he asked her for only one thing, delivered quietly through a letter that contained no excuses at all. I don't want to fix the marriage. I know I can't. I only want the chance to know my son. Not with gifts. Not with trips. Just time. Zoe read that letter more times than she'd admit to anyone. And eventually, cautiously, she agreed. Not for Ryan's sake, but for Kai's, who deserved the chance to know where half of himself came from. Ryan kept his word completely. He flew to Vancouver not as a billionaire, but as a man learning, slowly and humbly, how to be a father. He sat on the floor building miniature gardens with Kai for hours, learning which mosses Kai preferred, which tiny stones went where. He showed up to soccer practice in the rain, cheering louder than any other parent on the sideline. He taught himself to cook Zoe's favorite recipes, badly at first, so that Kai could grow up tasting both halves of his heritage at the same table. Slowly, without either of them forcing it, Kai began reaching for Ryan's hand without thinking. Then came the day, months later, in the middle of building yet another tiny garden, when Kai looked up and simply said, "Can you pass me that rock, Dad?" Ryan had to look away for a moment, so his son wouldn't see him cry. Zoe watched all of this unfold from a careful distance, guarding her heart the way anyone would after being told, in a room full of strangers, that her love had never been more than a smart business decision. In that same careful distance, she'd grown close to someone else. Daniel Hayes, a Canadian landscape architect who had helped her build her firm from nothing, who had stood beside her through every late night and every hard year, and who had never once pressured her toward anything more than friendship. Daniel and Ryan met eventually, inevitably, the way two people who both love the same child always do. There was no explosion, no rivalry, no dramatic confrontation. Just two men, standing in Zoe's backyard, watching Kai, coming to a quiet understanding that neither of them needed to compete for something that was never a competition to begin with. They simply both wanted Kai to be happy. And somehow, impossibly, that shared goal became its own kind of respect. We're almost at the end of this story, and I promise the final scene is worth every single second you've spent here. So if you haven't already, like this video and comment your thoughts, because this ending is going to stay with you. Years passed the way they always do, quietly, then all at once. Kai grew from a curious 6-year-old with a windowsill full of moss gardens into a sharp, thoughtful teenager who had somehow inherited his mother's talent for design and his father's relentless drive, without ever inheriting either of their scars. At 17, he entered a national environmental design competition with a proposal for sustainable housing built entirely around miniature green spaces. An idea, he told the judges, that had started with tiny gardens on a kitchen windowsill when he was 6 years old. He won. Standing in the audience that night, 3 people rose to their feet before anyone else in the auditorium. Zoe, tears already falling. Ryan, hand pressed hard against his chest. And Daniel, clapping until his palms ached, as proud as any father in the room. Kai found all 3 of them afterward, pulling them into one long, tangled hug, laughing and crying at the same time. When a reporter asked him what inspired his winning design, he thought for a moment, glanced at the three people who had raised him in their own different ways, and said simply, "The strongest buildings need more than one pillar." Ryan smiled through tears he no longer bothered to hide. Later, after the crowd had thinned and the cameras had gone home, Ryan found a quiet moment alone with Zoe near the edge of the auditorium. "I spent years trying to rebuild what I broke," he said softly. Zoe looked at him for a long moment, not with anger anymore, not even really with grief, but with something calmer, something that had finally made peace with everything that came before. "You couldn't rebuild our marriage," she said gently, "but you helped build the father Kai deserved." They stood there a moment longer, two people who had once promised each other forever and instead found something else entirely. Not a second chance at romance, but a shared, unbreakable devotion to the son they had raised on opposite sides of the world. Then they walked away in different directions, not as husband and wife, but finally as two parents at peace. Some promises are too fragile to survive one careless moment, spoken in a room full of people who never should have heard it first. But love, real love, can still find its way back. Not always as romance, not always the way we expect, but as the quiet courage to become someone better for the people who matter most. If this story moved you even a little, make sure to like this video, drop a comment telling me which part hit you hardest, and subscribe so you never miss the next one, because there are so many more stories like Zoe and Ryan's still waiting to be told.